Okay, so this is the 6th time I've tried to record this, between people calling me and this thing crashing. Um, it's been a joy. So we have a half hour to get through this. It's 9:17 p.m. Thursday, May 7th. If you want to keep up, this is page 73 in your book. We're dealing with chapter 5, and it's section 5-3. And they call it parallel motion, which is the next topic, but we're just talking about motion in general to start here. And what we want to talk about is how each voice interacts with each other. So when we write a chorale, let's do it right here. You have a soprano voice, you have an alto voice, you have a tenor voice, and you have a bass voice. And each note, okay, so let's say this is our melody, C, D, E, D, C. And the alto, F, 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 because that's what all the altos do. They just sing one note. The tenor goes here, 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 and here. Bass, 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 bass. So you have different relationships between each voice. So you have to worry about what the alto and the soprano are doing, what the soprano is doing with the tenor, and what the soprano is doing with the bass. You also have to think about what the alto is doing with the tenor and what the alto is doing with the bass. And then you have the tenor and the bass and how they are interacting with each other. So we have different types of motion that we're going to talk about. And we're going to start it down here a little bit. So there's 5 different types of motion. The first type is called static. We have F and A, and we're pretending this is an alto and soprano part. And they stay on the exact same pitch. So this is the first type, and it's called static. And static is when neither part moves. So you start, and F to A is a major third, F to A is a major third. So you have to think 2 different ways. You have to think both vertically and you have to think horizontally. So vertically, we're dealing with a major third. Right? Vertically, we're dealing with major thirds. But when they move horizontally, they're staying on a perfect first. So that means that they're static. Nothing is going on. 2, there's no change. 2 is called oblique. And oblique is when one voice stays the same and the other voice moves in a direction. So one voice stays the same, the other voice moves. Does it have to be the soprano moving? No, it doesn't. So oblique, one part moves. The third type of motion is called contrary. And this is rather important. We're going to be seeing a lot of contrary motion. We're going to be seeing a lot of the 5th motion as well. Contrary motion is when they start here, and we'll go back to number 2 in a minute because I forgot to show you something. But this voice moves down, and this moves up. And they move in the opposite direction. Soprano goes up, alto goes down. Both move in the opposite direction. So we start on a third here, on a major third, and we end up on a perfect fifth, where the F goes down to an E, that's a minor second. The A goes up to a B natural, that's a major second. On this oblique, they have a major third, and they end on a perfect fifth. So it's very similar, okay, in terms of just how it ends in the perfect fifth world, but the path they take is different. This voice moves a first. It doesn't move at all. The soprano voice moves up a minor third. Number 4. The fourth type of motion is called similar. And with similar motion, what we have is both move in the same direction, but by different intervals. So if we're on F and A again, let's say the A moves up to a C, but the F moves up to a G. They both move in the same direction, but they have different intervals, but by different intervals. And at this point, we're talking about how the voices move horizontally. This is a major second in the alto and a minor third in the soprano. They start on a major third and they land on a perfect fourth. The fifth kind is parallel. This is important too because we're going to come back to this, where both voices move in the same direction by the same interval. So it's same direction, same interval. Where similar was moving by a different interval in the same direction. So here's F, here's A. They have a major third. The A is going to go to B, the F is going to go to G. So that's moving a major second, that's moving a major second, and they stay on a major third. Parallel motion is cool, but there's some not acceptable types of parallel motion. So we're going to dig into the objectionable types of motion we're going to deal with. So we're going to call this next section objectionable motion. The first type of objectionable motion is called parallel fifths and octave. Parallel fifths, parallel octaves. It's okay to have parallels. And in theory class, I forgot to tell you guys this today, so my sincerest apologies. So here we go. We're dealing with parallel fifths, parallel octaves. If we have an F in the alto and a C in the soprano, and in the next chord, you have an F and a C. This is a parallel fifth because you have a perfect fifth here and a perfect fifth here. And yes, P5 can stand for parallel fifth, and that's when it's in the context of two brackets. P5 can also stand for perfect fifth. As you can see here when it's referencing an interval. But this is okay if it's in the same chord. So that's a 1 chord, that's a 1/6. It's okay if the chord stays the same. It's not okay if we have F and C and F and C. If we're on a 1 chord, and if we're on a 1 chord, that would be in the key of F. Just to keep things cool here. And then we go to a 6-7 chord. Then this would be parallel fifths, and this would be bad. Another example of a parallel fifth would be F and C. And then these voices move up to G and D. So this would be going from a 1 chord to a 2 chord. This voice is moving up by a major second. This voice moving up by a major second. You have a perfect fifth here and a perfect fifth there. This is parallel fifths. That is also bad. The same thing goes for octaves, right? If you have F and F and you are going to D and D, you have an octave. I wrote that incorrectly. Excuse me. Will it erase? So here you have a perfect octave, and here you have a perfect octave, and they're moving. You have F to F, D to D. They're starting on the same pitch, landing on the same pitch. This is a parallel octave. This is also bad. As long as the chord is changing. Again, going from 1 chord to a 6 chord. So that is one type of objectionable motion that we're dealing with. The next type of objectionable motion is called contrary fifths and octaves. So a contrary fifths or an octave is when you are starting on an interval, a fifth or octave, and the voices move in the opposite direction. There's an I in there. And land on a fifth or octave. Example: treble clef. We'll do bass clef, just because you find this more in bass clef, just because the bass and tenor. You're gonna find it more between the bass and other voice, because the bass has more freedom to move around. Okay? It can happen in the tenor and upper voices as well. So let's say we're starting on an A and an E. And then the bass goes to the D, tenor goes to the A. So we have an A and we have an E, which is the interval of a perfect fifth. Then we're landing on the pitch of D and A, which is also a perfect fifth. This gets labeled as contrary fifths, or fifths by contrary motion. Same thing happens, and of course, change it to blue, it's bad. So we want to avoid writing like this and using this in our writing. It's going to be hard at first to identify what's happening. So there's an F, there's an F. And then, so you have an octave F. So here's a perfect octave, and it's landing on a unison. And a perfect unison is the same as an octave. So it starts at an octave, it ends at an octave. This is a little harder to see, and so just it's harder to write. You're not going to have this a lot because leaping an octave is not something usually done. So you're going to see more of the contrary fifths as opposed to the contrary octaves. The third type is called unequal fifths. And unequal fifths is when you go between diminished fifth. So when you go from a diminished fifth to a perfect fifth between the bass and another voice. So it has to happen between the bass and another voice. If we were to, and we'll just use bass clef again, all you cellists out there. So we have a B going to an A, and then we have an F going to an E. Now, while this may look like parallel fifths because you have a fifth here and you have a fifth here, this is actually a diminished fifth. B to F is 6 half steps. So this is a diminished fifth. And then it's resolving to a perfect fifth. This is a no-go. This is bad. This is also bad. I forgot to mark that up here. So you have right here, and this is called U5, unequal fifths. You want to avoid that. Now, you can go, let's do it the other way. So let's go B to F sharp, and then we'll go C that wouldn't make sense. I was going to say C to G flat, but let's call it C, back up, let's call it A to E flat. This is wrong for a couple reasons. This is an augmented interval right here. So you're not supposed to have an augmented interval, like an augmented second. But here, we have a perfect fifth, and then it's going to land on A and E flat, so that's a diminished fifth. And pretend that wasn't an augmented second here. This is okay. The last type of fifths of objectionable motions that we're going to try and avoid is called the direct fifth, and we'll just do it in blue, why not? You'll also hear me refer to it as a hidden fifth, because it is rather difficult to spot. So, a few things about this. Number one, it has to happen between the soprano and the bass voice. There has to be a leap in the soprano. And it needs to end, so it needs to land on a fifth or an octave. And we're going to jump over here so that you can actually see what we're dealing with. So, here's our treble clef, here's our bass clef, here's our grand staff. So, if we're doing an E, and we'll put a G here for kicks and giggles. E and C. And then we have D, A, F, F. This, I think there's a leap in the soprano, and it ends between here and here on a perfect fifth. This, and we'll change over to red, is bad. This is called from here, so we label it as a D5. The same thing can be done with octaves. So we have C to G in the bass. We'll put a G here and a B here. C to D and E to G. So again, you have a leap in the soprano. There's your leap. And they're ending on octaves. There's your octave, your G to G. This is labeled as D8, direct octaves. So when you're looking for direct octaves, it has to be between the soprano and the bass, has to have a leap in the soprano, and it has to land on our fifth or an octave. Now, we already talked about these relationships, right? That we're concerned about when you are analyzing. So we're going to deal with this chord right here. So you want to think about how the soprano goes from there to there, the motion of the soprano, and how it interacts with that of the alto voice. After you do the alto voice, you want to check what's going on with the soprano and the tenor and how that's interacting. Then you want to check how the soprano is interacting with the bass. And you want to be looking for these objectionable parallels. Something I want to go through because we have a few minutes. Right there. Let's move over to that section. Because I want to just kind of go over the self-test with you all. So what you want to look for, this is page 79. Here's your chorale. They want you to try and find all of these things. They want you to try and find parallel octaves, parallel fifths, direct fifths, contrary fifths, and a spacing error. And the spacing error they're telling you is on 71 to 72. The spacing error is actually the easiest to find. You want to find anything with an interval larger than an octave between the voices. So what you're doing is you're going through here and you're looking for that space. Is there a big space here, big space here, big space here? Okay? This is interesting here. This D carries across because it's a half note. So I always do that and tie it over. Okay, what's the space here? What's the space here? Wow, that's pretty big. So right there, that is your spacing area. You write it as a +8. Then up here, if you wanted to write it, what you do is, this is measure 1, measure 2, measure 3, beat 1, 2, and 3. So this is measure 3, beat 2, and that's what you write for the answer. Or you mark it, like I did here, with the +8, or you put a 5 above it, because that is number 5. Something I showed everyone in theory class today, which I think could have helped. When you're looking, and this is like a giant word search, you want to find all of the fifths and octaves. So what I like to do is just take, my pencil, and I want to mark all of the fifths. So there's a D and an A. Here's an E and a B. The A to the E. D to D is an octave. B to B is an octave. And right there, we just said D to D and B to B. So here's an octave. That's a perfect octave. here is a perfect octave. And for intents and purposes of what's going on here, the chords are changing. So here is your parallel octave. And just by marking that, that's how we found it. It's like a word search. So parallel octaves is measure 2, beat 1 through beat 2. And that's all you have to write. And then you can also sit here and put a 1 above this. So we found that. We found that. Let's keep marking those octaves. G to D, D to A, G to D, A to E, D to D. Now, if you look between, do you see here how we have a fifth here, a fifth here? Right? But then all of a sudden it drops down to the alto voice. You cannot, nothing can come of this interval right here because it has to stay in the same voice. It has to stay between the soprano and the bass. So right there, that's not going to give us anything we're looking for. But we have a D to an A, which is a fifth. We have an E to a B, which is a fifth. That is a parallel fifth. Right? And it's a perfect fifth. D to A is a perfect fifth. E to B is a perfect fifth. So we take our utensil and we write, this is a parallel fifth. This is the answer for number 2. Or if you submit it, you can write measure 1, beat 1 through beat 2. Oh, you also have to write the voices that it happens in. This is between the soprano and the bass. Number 1 is between the soprano and the bass. Number 5 is between the soprano and the alto. Now remember, direct fifths. There's 3 criteria we have to meet. Soprano and the bass. Has to be a leap in the soprano. And then we also have to land on a fifth. It doesn't matter where we start. It matters what we land on. Okay? So you want to look for a leap. So we'll use yellow. There's a leap in the soprano here. There's a leap here. There's a leap here. So it has to happen in one of those 3 spots. That's where your direct fifth has to land. Okay? Contrary fifths, you want to start on a fifth. So you want to find your fifths. We'll use blue. So we have a fifth here at the beginning, but we already established that was parallel fifths. We have A to E right here, but then it shifts to octaves between the soprano and the bass, so it can't be there. B to B here is an octave. We have a G to a D, that's a fifth, and then we have a D to an A. That's a fifth. Huh. So here is your contrary fifths. And it just so happens that here is going to be your direct fifths, your D5. Big leap in the soprano, and they land, it happens between the soprano and the bass, and it lands on a fifth. Okay. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions. This is going to be your assignment that's going to be due. I'm posting this now, but it's not going to be due until next Friday, and I believe that date is the 15th. So hope you have a good week. Miss you. Hope to see you soon. Bye.